Everybody's going to the party, have a real good time.
Hey folks, this is Iratron. Thank you very much for joining us tonight as we are playing Terraria on the old Xbox 360. You guys know the drill. It's time to hook you up with some sweet Terraria items. Anyways, guys, we have a boatload of messages to go through, to send out, and all that good stuff. So, we're going to address those who have provided us with their gamer tags via YouTube. We have a pretty impressive list. We'll try to get to some of the messages in our inbox. Anyways, guys, appreciate your patience and all that good stuff. Tonight, we're going to do something different. So, kick back, relax, and let me know what you think about the new format. This is not something that we're going to do all the time. Just thought we'd spice it up. All right, guys, here we go.
Split show for you tonight. Later on, a physicist discusses why God is not dead in quantum creativity. But here's what's happening. Well, that Malaysia crash, if it was a crash, gets stranger and stranger. Teams trying to locate the Boeing 777 that vanished over the sea 3 days ago will scour data for radar signatures while seeking to detect pinging from black boxes as the search for visible wreckage proves elusive. While aviation specialists and 4 decades of case files suggest that the Malaysian plane will be found, investigators are in a very unique position of being unaware of a large jet's whereabouts more than 60 hours now after it disappeared. The search for Flight 370 was expanded to an area of ocean spanning Hong Kong to the shores now of Sumatra, as well as on land. No conclusive sightings of debris so far. Technological search methods will increasingly come into play. Jim Sanders, of course, an investigative journalist, author of The Downing of TWA Flight 800. James, I remember our discussions in St. Louis and on Coast to Coast during that TWA Flight 800 period. But this one is strange. I want your take on it. Jim Sanders.
I've spent a good portion of the day just tracking the news, and this has really been a very important news day, even though major stories didn't appear. AP put out a story that around midday, West Coast time, saying that, and quoting the chief of staff for the Malaysian Air Force, they give a direct quote with him giving pretty detailed description of the plane going left, coming back over, flying over Malaysia, and then out into the western offshore area. And AP says they came up with a senior military official in the Malaysian investigation of what was going on who confirmed everything that the general said, the Air Force general said, but that this source wouldn't give his name because of the sensitivity of it. Okay, well, 45 minutes ago, give or take a couple minutes, the second part of this story comes out. Now the Air Force general is saying, oh, gee, should have had a V8. I got it all wrong. And I've been doing this for 29 years, specifically investigating the federal government. So what I would do off of this as an investigator, I'm not going to do it, I hope, but this is what I would do if I had the ability to develop sources on this. My investigative hypothesis would be that general's telling the truth. That makes it a terrorist act, or the pilots themselves somehow got involved in this for suicide purposes or terrorist purposes. Whoever was in control of that plane, it did what the Air Force general said. That is the working hypothesis. Now, what came later is the foreign policy people, definitely from the United States and probably from China and maybe Israel and who knows who else, coming back and saying, listen, guys, back that sucker up. Wipe the slate clean. We don't know yet what story we wish to give to the public once we do find that plane. And we don't want to be weighted down by this story that means we have to deal with it as a terrorist act. That would be my hypothesis now, and I'd say it's a pretty good one right now.
James, earlier the Washington Post reported that some of the family members were able to call the cell phones of those who were on the plane. Of course, nobody answered. But is that true? Have you heard that?
I've seen it all over the Internet. I believe I've seen it in reports and not just Internet chatter. Most of the stuff I've been seeing is either AP or Reuters. picked up by Fox or Bloomberg. So I'm fairly certain that I read that in one of their missives today.
I'm going to ask you to speculate on what the heck you think happened. If you can paint us a picture, that plane's in the air, it's 100 or 200 miles from Vietnam. What's going on at that time?
Okay, and this is obviously pure speculation.
I understand.
On what little I've been able to come up with so far. Well, obviously, the transponder was deliberately shut off. That it wasn't, plane didn't blow up then. We know that the transponder shut off either just before or just after it made the left turn to go west-southwest, as the Air Force General said. So either somebody was able to take over the plane, that secure door wasn't secure, or the pilots were themselves the one involved in it. But whoever, somebody had control of that plane, diverted it, and the rest, who knows? But that is the meaningful part of that at this time.
Would they have tanked the plane in the ocean, or would they have landed it somewhere? And if they did that, where would it be? Where would they have landed?
Well, I have to tell you, this is really wild speculation, and I want to underscore speculation and nowhere near fact. But the story that fits comfortably, doesn't mean it's the story, but what fits comfortably is that somebody was being tracked, and they generally knew what was going on in this plane. They finally decided to just take it out.
And now when you say take it out, what do you mean by that? Taken down?
Yeah, shot down.
A missile, something like that?
Yeah, and again, just speculation, because it should have been pretty easy to find this plane, no matter if it was blown up or if the pilots were committing suicide. You're going to have a lot of large pieces because there's not enough explosive force when you hit the ocean to, unless they made a real nice glide-in, fantastic landing, and then the plane just sank. That's obviously something that could have happened. But why?
Well, that's the
no
big
reason
question.
For that one. Yeah.
Well, and we saw that during the TWA Flight 800 disaster, wreckage was all over the place. If something hit this plane, if a missile took this plane down, shouldn't there be debris everywhere?
Yeah, if it was a normal-sized missile, there should be. Now, Jim Kallstrom, my nemesis over on the FBI side, I retired law enforcement, investigating him while he was, once he figured out who I was, investigating me. He even admitted that if it had been the United States AIM missile, that sucker is so big and has so much explosive force that there would have just been little tiny pieces and you'd have never found any significant portion of the airplane. From there you can develop, a speculation that a very significant weapon hit it and took it out. Doesn't mean it happened, but that's one explanation until they actually find the crash scene. But I will tell you, I'll guarantee you, that unless it's to somebody's political foreign policy advantage, the facts on this thing, if there was anything other than a suicide or a mechanical, which is highly improbable it was mechanical, will never come out. It's only if somebody says, okay, foreign policy-wise, I can use that to stir up the masses.
And, James, if it were a large missile, it would have to have come from some nation because no terror group is going to have one of those.
Correct. Absolutely correct. But it's in that area, if that Air Force General is correct, that plane ended up flying in an area that is heavily patrolled by the Chinese, the Americans, and the British and French have some forces in there.
Yeah.
And after that, I don't know about India and those, but there's a lot of military hardware out there.
Could this have been an accidental takedown?
No.
All right, Jim. I want to stay in touch with you all week long. James Sanders, the downing of TWA Flight 800, as he reacts to this bizarre story of the disappearance of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. And, as the baffling investigators are running all over the place now, some people have entered the realm of the supernatural. The Washington Post reporting that smartphones of some passengers who boarded the flight still active and connected to the net, even though the plane has vanished. So there's a bizarre story there. A migrant worker says that several of his workers from his company, that their phones were still working. They dialed them. They rang. Of course, nobody answered. And then there were other four mind-bending possibilities, as Alex Jones's Infowars.com reports, and that was that the plane has been confiscated, kidnapped somehow, that the passengers are being held hostage somewhere, that there was a bizarre Stargate explanation, that this plane literally flew into a Stargate. It's gone somewhere in some other dimension. I guess you can't rule that out. We've talked about things like that on this show. The failed search, okay, is another possibility where they just can't find anything while they search. And then, of course, an advanced military weapons explanation, which Jim Sanders is kind of hinting to. So we'll continue to follow this story, probably one of the strangest I have witnessed in a long, long time. Scientists in Australia say they have begun work on a project that will see lasers fired from Earth to blast away the thousands of tons of space debris orbiting our planet. Let's check in with space historian Robert Zimmerman. Boy, this is going to be one heck of a machine if they get this thing working, Robert.
Well, I'm not so sure I want to be on a plane if this thing is going, to be very honest. This is one of those stories that pops up all the time, George. Some government project put some money into something. We're going to someday do this wonderful, fantastic thing, use lasers to get out space junk. But this is a preliminary design study. It's so far down the road, I wouldn't take it too seriously. I think it's much more interesting, the kind of studies where they use robots to go up there and capture and sweep it up. There are at least 2 or 3 studies.
Yeah.
The actual design work going on is from companies that want to do this and have raised money for it. This is less likely, just because shooting lasers up from the ground raises questions of what you do, the atmosphere. How will that affect the atmosphere if you got planes in the air?
Well, I was going to say, what if you use a laser on some plane that you want to take down? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, it has so much. To have that capability is so has so many ramifications outside of just getting rid of the space junk that I think it's not likely to fly. It might fly, actually. That might be a more effective way to use it, which is to send a robot into orbit with a limited power laser that can just do the job that needs to be done. Therefore you don't need as much power once it's in orbit. It can get close to its target and fire a much less powerful laser. And once again, science fiction, you don't want to put a object into orbit that has a robot that has very powerful lasers. We're in the scientific realm there, and again, it's not something we want.
You can track Robert Zimmerman, of course, his website, behindtheblack.com. Thanks a lot, Robert. Appreciate that. The number of police officers patrolling this year's Boston Marathon will double to over 3,500 1 year after 2 bombs exploded near the finish line, killing 3 people and injuring more than 260. How about this election in North Korea, right? Kim Jong-un, he was the only candidate on the ballot. Guess what? He won with 100% of the vote. That's what they say, only in North Korea. Troubled Japanese Bitcoin exchange Mt. Gox has won temporary bankruptcy protection here in the United States. A judge in Dallas agreed to protect the firm's assets and temporarily halt 2 U.S. lawsuits while bankruptcy proceedings occur in Japan. That firm lost about $473 million worth of customers' Bitcoins. They say they were hacked. 2 men were found guilty in Saudi Arabian courts this week for sending messages posting on Twitter. One Saudi man sentenced to 10 years in prison for using Twitter to encourage protests and undermine the country's leadership. How about that for free speech? Not happening there. Parents are constantly being told to restrict the amount of time their children spend using phones and other gadgets, but their own technology habits could be equally as damaging. Researchers from Boston's Medical Center studied a total of 55 parents, and while they ate at fast food restaurants with their children, and they found that 33% of the parents use their phones almost continuously during the meals, and some of them did not even look at their children in the eyes. Let's check with psychiatrist Peter Bregan. Peter, this is a sad. I've seen this happen, though, and I bet you have, too.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. You know, another one of their data was that almost three-quarters of the parents used phones, and these are children 10 years and younger. So what's going on here? You know, the kids are feeling rejected. The kids are not getting the kind of educational, loving family experience they should be getting. The parents are basically rejecting their kids. They're not relating to the children. And if they're doing this with their kids when they're 10 years old or 5 years old, what do they think is going to happen when the kids are 15 years old?
That's right.
They're going to be more and more estranged from their parents. It's really sad. It's like, George, it's like we've forgotten that parents are supposed to bring up children, supposed to work with them and play with them and enjoy them. And when I deal with a family that's got a problem child, they just a kind of a routine family, not a very down and out family, the first thing I do is suggest that each parent get accustomed to going out for some time on the weekend with one of their kids and spending time doing something that the kid enjoys, where they'll also talk and hang out, not just going to a movie,
You're
but maybe
right.
eating lunch, eating
Together.
at a fast food place.
That's right.
Yeah.
Peter, thanks so much. You're one of the best. And my son, Jonathan, and his wife, Kristen, they've got two little kids, and I watch them. When I'm in St. Louis, I just watch how they deal with the kids. And, I mean, they take them to the zoo and to the park, and, you know, when they take them out to eat at a little place, I mean, it's one-on-one with them. It's really special, and they're doing it the right way. They say in 16 years, cancer will become the leading cause of death in the United States, surpassing heart disease. That's according to a new report. And in Michigan, a woman found dead for 6 years after her money runs out. That's right. For 6 years, the bills were paid automatically. The grass was cut. No one noticed that the body of the dead woman was sitting in the back seat of a car in a garage in residential Pontiac, Michigan. For 6 years. Her mummified body was finally found this week because somebody was dispatched to check on the property because the house fell into foreclosure after the money ran out of her account and the mortgage payment stopped. What's even more bizarre is just a few years ago, she still voted. How in the heck does that happen? Up next, the global elite. What are they trying to do with us? That's next with William Engdahl. Next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norieff. William Engdahl is one of the most widely discussed analysts of current political and economic developments. He's been with me before on the program, noted author as well, Gods of Money, Full Spectrum Dominance, A Century of War, and Seeds of Destruction. We're going to be talking with him about the global elite and just what is happening on this planet. We're going to look in on the Ukraine as well. William, welcome back to Coast to Coast.
Good to be with you again, George.
You too. Where are you now? You still out there in Europe?
Yes, I'm in Frankfurt in Germany.
Are they talking about this downed Malaysian plane out that way, William?
Oh, the whole world is talking about it. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever heard of.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
So what have you been working on lately?
Well, I've been forced to work intensively on the situation in the Ukraine in the last several months, and finishing a book, but I'd rather not talk about that prematurely until it's ready for publication.
Okay, understand. Old Vladimir Putin seems to be flexing his muscles these days, huh?
Well, what I think he was really caught short when February 22nd, it looked like the European Union, the opposition in Ukraine, and the Yanukovych government had finally reached a compromise to end the violent protests and the occupation of the capital city in Kiev, and come up with a proposal for elections in December, various things. Within 12 hours, that was in shatters as snipers shot and killed, and they were the same snipers, according to forensic evidence, shot and killed government police
as well as opposition demonstrators, and created total panic.
Yes.
And that led to the breakdown. So the question is, who deployed those snipers? The only party, interestingly enough, that wasn't invited to that compromise meeting, the European Union, 3 foreign ministers, German, Polish, and French, hammered out the deal intensively in 2 days of negotiations. The opposition, all 3 leaders of the opposition parties were present, as was Yanukovych and a Russian observer. And the only party that was not present that's played a major role in this was Victoria Nuland's State Department. So we may never know the exact details of who picked up the phone and ordered these snipers to be deployed, but there's indications that it goes back to certain secret forces that NATO has developed over the years.
What is the significance of the Ukraine, William? We're going to take this real quick break. I went a little long on the Malaysian plane situation, but we've got you for 2 hours, so you just
2 hours, okay.
Okay, yeah, you just hang with me. We're going to be back with you in just a moment. F. William Engdahl with us, our special guest, as we talk about the global elite. What is really going on? I'm George Norrie, and we will be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'll tell you what we're going to do tonight. So many things are breaking with that Malaysian story, and I want to get you involved. What we're going to do is we're going to spend a solid hour here with William Engdahl as we talk about just what's happening with the global elite, what's happening in Ukraine, how it affects you. Then next hour, James Sanders will come back as we talk about that incredible situation with that plane, and we will take your phone calls. Then later on tonight, of course, the physicist Amit Goswami will join us as we will talk about quantum creativity. So ride with us tonight. You're going to have a wonderful program tonight on Coast to Coast AM. And are you a Coast Insider yet? You can be, as I've said so many times. It's only 15 cents a day. You can get downloads and podcasting. They are actively working now on opening up the library for 5 years of past programs. That's over 1,800 programs that you can download and play with once it is ready, but they are working on that. If you want to sign up to be a Coast Insider, just go to coasttocoastam.com. We will be back in a moment. More with William Engdahl on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast F. William Engdahl with us. William, you have looked at the global elite for just a number of years, and of course you've written a lot about it with your very incredible books. What do you think? What does your gut tell you? What is happening on this planet right now? This positioning, this land grabbing, this manipulation. What are they doing?
Well, I think what we're seeing is unforeseen consequences breaking out everywhere. It's instabilities. I think certain powerful families thought that they had an agenda for regime change throughout the Arab world, the so-called Arab Spring. They had an agenda to encircle China. They had an agenda to encircle Russia and its nuclear arsenal through missile defense in Poland, the Czech Republic, Turkey, and elsewhere. And these things aren't working like clockwork. The American economy has been hollowed out in the last almost decade, even longer. And the debts that have been piled on the U.S. government have just made things dysfunctional to save the banks of Wall Street, the so-called gods of money, as I refer to them, at the expense of the real economy, real people in the United States. And that has an impact on everything. You press a switch and water comes out the ceiling. You know, you press the switch to turn on a light. And that's the kind of phenomenon we're seeing. It's just too many balls in the air at one time by people who thought they were. I think it's a combination of arrogance and naivete about what they're playing with on some of these things, especially the Ukrainian situation.
And what would you say is the significance of the Ukrainian situation to us, people in the United States, people at home, people listening to this show right now, William, and they go, I don't even know where the Ukraine is. I don't care. What do we say to them?
Well, it could be the trigger for World War III, so we better find out and better start looking at a map and reading up on it a little bit, because Ukraine is absolutely crucial. During the Soviet Union, Ukraine and Russia were integral. Ukraine and Russia, the cultures go back to Kievan Rus, hundreds and hundreds of years. The origins of Russia as a nation, so is intimately linked with Kiev and the eastern part of Ukraine. Ukraine didn't exist until around World War I as an integral nation. It was part of the Polish Empire, then it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then under the Soviet Union, it became part of the Soviet Union. The significance is if Ukraine is hived off from economic and other cooperation with Russia, then the next step is going to be U.S. Pentagon is going to place missile defense installations on the soil of Ukraine, seconds away from key nuclear installations of Russia. And, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. When Putin looks around and sees missile defense installations with armed warheads in Poland, in Czech Republic, in Turkey, in Bulgaria, and so forth, he begins to get the idea there's a hostile intent on the side of NATO. And then add Ukraine to this, and that's devastating. The other thing is Ukraine is a pivot between Western Europe and the Eurasian landmass, talking in geopolitical terms. The Eurasian landmass goes from Russia all the way to China and is the largest economic space in the world, the area that Brzezinski, the former Carter security advisor, wrote in his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard. That is the one entity that can pose a challenge to this American sole superpower domination of the entire world. It's not the American people. It's a power elite that controls the U.S. military industry, that controls Wall Street banks, that controls big oil, and they are out for what I call full spectrum dominance. The Pentagon calls it full spectrum dominance. That is to control absolutely everything on this planet. And I don't think any one person or party should control everything on any planet.
I don't think Putin is going to back down in this situation. Do you?
Well, he can't. The Crimea, first of all, the Crimea history. The Crimea is Russian and has been for 250 years. In fact, under the Tsar, the Russian fleet was sent to support the American Revolution in the 18th century. I mean, they played a crucial role in the birth of America, and that was based on Crimea and Sevastopol. The Crimea this is a peninsula in the Black Sea, and the Crimea was part of the Soviet Union, of course, but Khrushchev, some say in a drunken moment in 1954, decided administratively to give Crimea to Ukraine because he was born in Ukraine. Who knows what the justification was, but it was an administrative decision. And then after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 91, they came to treaty agreements for basing of the Russian fleet in Crimea. So, this is a Russian high security priority to be able to guarantee access to that base in Crimea, plus the fact that the majority of the population there is Russian and don't identify with a separatism from Russia. So, yeah.
You have recently finished a book that is going to come out in English called Target China.
Right.
And let me ask you this. Do you see an alliance between Russia and China?
It's a very uneasy alliance. I just got back from Beijing 3 weeks ago and had talks over there with people on the strategic level. Historically, during the Cold War, of course, there was a Sino-Soviet split, and the CIA played a good role in trying to foster distrust on both sides, but the Russians, for their part, helped it along with some of their bungling policies toward China. But the crucial thing is both of them are facing a similar dilemma. As they see it, they look on a military map of the world, and they're both being encircled by the same Pentagon, by the same NATO. The Obama Asia pivot, as it's called, is really a China pivot. That is a redirection of U.S. military force and U.S. allies toward encircling and militarily checkmating any independence of China. and that includes U.S. alliance with Abe's government in Japan, and that's a very ominous development.
Yeah, the situation between the Chinese and Japan seems to be getting tense over those little uninhabited islands in the East China Sea. I mean, could you see the situation where China goes to war with Japan, Russia stays tough on Crimea, and we're forced to jump into this thing?
Well, let's pray to God that doesn't happen, but it's getting very, very close to wars by miscalculation, and that's the real danger of this. When I said you press the light switch and the water falls out of the ceiling, it's kind of that kind of a situation where just the people in Washington, the generation that's calling the shots right now, are getting dangerously close to the X generation in terms of lack of historical depth, lack of cultural understanding of what they're playing with when they start playing games with the Muslim Brotherhood and think that they're in control, or they start playing games with Japan versus China and think that they can control the animosities there. It goes back to, the rape of Nanking by the Japanese soldiers during World War II, the refusal of Abe to apologize for any of that, and the refusal of Abe to not visit the war shrine where Class A war criminals are buried, as a direct insult to the Chinese and also the Koreans. So there's a militancy growing up in Japan, which some neocons around Dick Cheney think that they're steering and that they can control like they did or tried to with other things. But most of those ventures by the neocons end up a complete mess, like the situation in Iraq. So we're in a dangerous situation where wise heads are in the minority in terms of counsel to the President of the United States. I think the pullback from Syria last September by President Obama was an absolutely crucial turn that probably avoided World War III. That was done at 1 second to midnight because he was given information, I was told by reliable sources in the intelligence community, he was given information that Washington was being played by false intelligence from the Saudis and from the Israelis on the whole Syrian chemical weapons question. Then Putin offered a face-saving way out. So suddenly Demon Putin becomes lifesaver for Obama's presidency and giving him a way to get the weapons out of Syria. So it's a very, very unstable global situation. I was telling a Russian friend of mine recently, in my 30-some years of analyzing world geopolitics, world politics, I've never seen so many hot points, so many unstable situations, flashpoints, at the same time.
All over the place.
Blowing up,
Yeah, all over the place. Is anybody unstable enough to push the trigger, the nuke trigger?
Let's hope not. Really, let's hope not. But, you would have to be mad, but there are some mad people in this world. That's the only answer I can give.
Maybe wars will be done with the big powers in negotiation and not on the battlefield. What do you think?
Well, I would hope, but a negotiation for peace, not for war. I had a fascinating discussion with an Egyptian friend the other day about the situation in Egypt, just to give an example. And you recall last summer, surprisingly, the military seized power and outlawed the Muslim Brotherhood. They were destroying the country with their Sharia Islamic law and all sorts of restraints on public liberties and so forth. So the democracy protest of 2 years ago was a shambles, and they were turning it into an Islamic dictatorship, as people saw it in Egypt. And suddenly the military got promises of billions of dollars from the Saudi government and from the Emirates, because the Saudis realized that the Muslim Brotherhood has an agenda that might include getting rid of the Saudi monarchy.
That's
and they
right.
decided, as arch conservative as the Saudis are, that the Brotherhood was something worse. So now what's happened in Egypt, this is the fascinating part. What's happened in Egypt, instead of this persecution of Coptic Christians in Egypt, they have a Christian tradition going back to time immemorial. the Muslim Brotherhood were burning churches, Christian churches, and persecuting the Christians as well as other non-Sunni Islam groups, Sufi and so forth. And now what they're doing is, and leaving the economy to rot. The place was just falling apart. So now what's happening is the army is coming in, or has come in, and is rebuilding roads, paving things, building low-cost housing for the poor. They've really kind of learned their lesson in this whole situation, it seems. And the Saudis are giving them the okay to liberalize the teaching of Islam so that hate imams, these hate imams that whip up the youth to suicide bombings, and so that's forbidden now in Egypt. So this is a fascinating development, but it's not reported in the Western media.
No,
so I think we need to encourage more of that kind of human diplomacy and back off from these confrontational things that the neocons so much like Victoria Nuland in the Ukraine and so forth.
In the remaining minutes that we've got you, William, I want to talk about your work on GMOs and your well-known book, Genetic Manipulation. We're here in the United States. We're still battling labeling and identifying foods that are GMOs. The big boys seem to have defeated a couple chances at the ballot box, one in California specifically. Are we ever going to get to the point in this country where we will at least have the right to say that's genetic, that's a GMO food, and we don't want to buy it?
Well, one of the reasons I wrote The Seeds of Destruction back several years ago was I realized that there was an agreement between Father Bush Sr., when he was president in 1992, and the heads of Monsanto. One, that the U.S. government will not permit labeling of a food product having GMO, so the consumer doesn't know. Number two, that there will be no independent government testing of the health and safety of GMO on human or animal at all. And now the genie is out of the bottle. Almost every piece of meat you buy in the supermarket is a product of feed from GMO corn and GMO soybeans. The human consumption of GMO is just incalculable. There have been rat studies conducted in France and in Russia and elsewhere that show clearly that cancer tumors appear after 9-12 months of feeding on a GMO diet. And death rates, organ shrinkage, horrendous things. And yet nobody in the U.S. government is taking responsibility for the health and safety of the population. That is the story of GMO, and the probably as crucial is the herbicides that they're paired with, the patented seeds and the herbicides like Roundup from Monsanto. And these contain toxins that are some of the most dangerous toxins, like the dangers of dioxin and Agent Orange and so forth, but we're putting it on our food, and our children are eating it in our daily bread. They don't know because they're kept in ignorance by government policy. President Obama, look at Michael Taylor and what he's doing in the Food and Drug Administration, the former vice president of Monsanto. He's doing cronyism. Why don't you get rid of some people like this and show some leadership for the health of the nation? That's the kind of thing that's needed.
This government needs a lot of work, doesn't it, William?
Well, I think we've seen a steady deterioration of the moral fiber of the nation over the last, in my lifetime, over the last 35, 40 years since the Vietnam War, the assassination of Kennedy and so forth, that Martin Luther King, I think there is ground for encouragement. There's a process of people becoming aware, kind of waking up out of a long sleep, and realizing that they have to take responsibility for their own lives. And I think that is the crucial thing. Take responsibility for your own lives in a moral and open, honest way, and begin changing things. Not this phony Tea Party thing of the Koch brothers and whatnot, but real change on a human, family, friends, relatives level. And I see encouraging signs that that's beginning to happen in many ways.
It's going to have to happen because you can't rely on government to bail you out anymore.
Well, that's this dependency. We're a couch potato generation since television became so widespread, and that generates passivity. So you expect somebody to do everything for you, and that's not a good mentality to have an alert population that watches out for dangers in the everyday life.
William, I want to thank you. I know you were suffering with a little bad back right now, but I appreciate you spending.
Well, I'd just like to tell people to go, if they want more information, go to williamengdahl.com, my website. There they can find the books and click on it and order it, and that also helps me get the freedom for doing more research on this kind of thing.
Super, and we've got that website linked up with you, and I really appreciate you being on. We're going to bring in Jim Sanders in a moment and continue talking about the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, and we will take your calls this hour on this incredible story. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. As we continue to track this bizarre story of the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, which has just simply disappeared, Jim Sanders is going to stay with us this hour. Of course, he's the author of The Downing of TWA Flight 800. I remember the case, and I mean, to me, Jim is truly a patriot. He got into a real mess when he picked up some residue from the part of the plane, testing for the possibility of explosives, and he had quite a battle there. We'll talk with him a little bit about that, too. But let's get right into this when we come back, and we'll take your phone calls. What a story. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. James, thanks for coming back. We're going to take phone calls with you this hour about this truly bizarre story. I've got to tell you, James, the more I get into it, the stranger it seems. It really does.
Yes, it really does. That's why I started paying attention to it today, and I'm trying to get a manuscript first draft done by the end of the month. And so this was getting in my way, but I decided I at least better look at the AP, Reuters, and that kind of thing, see what was going on. And boy, there it was. You know.
James, here's something that really, is puzzling as well. At any point, don't you think the pilots at least could have said, we've got a problem, we've been hit by something, or just something? There's been just nothing there.
It would have, if they weren't the ones that instigated it, it would have taken a real pro to make it happen. But anybody that's a real pro would know what the pilots would try to do. And so that's why I say it would take a very professional job to keep that from happening.
What about the plane being taken over while it was in the air? Is that possible, like the 9/11 hijackers?
No, because then there would have been a signal put out. I mean, they have more than one way to let the world know that they're being taken over. So I don't see that. It would have had to have been something, and as a for instance, and this has been put out there, there was apparently two young ladies who, the co-pilot of this plane is alleged to have 2 years ago have opened the door for these two young ladies and let them in and take the entire trip with them, the pilot and the co-pilot, up in the cockpit. They would have taken that kind of thing, a little bait there to get the door open, to keep it open, and to have people get inside there where the pilot's feeling comfortable. I have no idea if that's what happened, but it would take something like that if the pilots themselves weren't the ones responsible for this.
Man, have you ever in your history of research, especially the work you did with TWA Flight 800, seen one this bizarre?
No, not. It'll be a few more days before I have to say that this is just incredible. But if they never publicly admit to finding the plane, then which I would assume meant they actually didn't find enough debris to declare it having been found, then to me things become quite clear. But other than that, I just going to have to hang here and see how this thing plays out. But there is no doubt in my mind that the best minds of the United States and probably of China, and again I'd have to say Israel, but anyway, the best minds, foreign policy minds, have to be going over scenarios if they don't already know exactly what happened.
Yes.
It's very likely. Let's say if terrorists did take it over, real professional job, those radios, you can dial any frequency in the world just about on there. There's just the 2 or 3 frequencies or 4 that a plane would use as it was flying along or in a declared emergency. There's lots of others. I'm not even sure how many it is, but I assume it's in the hundreds. By this time in history, that they could have gone anywhere to communicate with wherever the other bad guys were, and let them know that they were succeeding, that kind of thing. And that certainly, NSA, I can't believe they wouldn't have gotten that quickly.
All right, let's go to Robert in Minneapolis to get things started here. Lots of people have their questions. Robert, welcome to the program. You are on the air, and Danny, you're going to have to click him in because our program is not working. Go ahead, Robert.
Hey, George. Yeah, hey, George. This is Robert from Minneapolis. I just wanted to say, I don't know if you're a fan of Hawaii Five-0, but there was a recent episode on there where some little boy had a laptop computer, and he hacked into the systems of an airliner that left out of Hawaii going to the mainland, and supposedly this boy had control of the aircraft. I don't know. I heard of a rumor that possibly this could have happened in this case with Malaysia 370. Do your guests think of anything like that or heard of anything about that?
What do you think, James?
I just earlier today read the, was it FAA or NTSB? I forget. Anyway, I went over and found there was a bulletin put out on the 777 in particular that a year or more back, they had to quickly make some fixes in the electronic system because people could tamper with the planes. They weren't real specific about exactly how they could tamper with it, but at least theoretically, from what the bulletin said, as I was reading it, I said, wow, this would make a good movie script. I didn't know that Hawaii 5.0 or somebody had already done a script off of it.
Yeah, it was just surprising me because my dad's actually a pilot for Delta, so I know a little bit about it, but I know that they said that the Boeing 777 has only one system, or that particular aircraft only had one system that was connected to both the cabin computers and the main cockpit computer, because I know there's a little screen in your headset that you can touch and say, oh, this is where you are, the GPS, whatever, that's when the transponder is active, correct?
Right, and
it's just kind of weird, nowadays where you can access the different frequencies from a computer or cell phone or smartphone or whatever.
Yeah, the time frame in which that had to be fixed, and assuming they got a decent fix, you wouldn't think that could happen, and it certainly didn't say in the bulletin that could happen, but it didn't say it couldn't. So it was one of those things that it was so vaguely worded. You knew exactly what you had to fix, but you weren't quite sure from the bulletin itself why. You kind of generally knew, but not specifically. It didn't say anything to the effect that somebody could take control of the plane. But there's some very good people out there, the hackers. So anything's possible, I guess.
James, what about the supernatural, the possibilities? I've had some people say, look, as we talked earlier, phones are ringing. Maybe they went through some kind of portal of some type. I guess at this point we can't rule anything out, can we?
No, it's several days too early. I was strictly speculating on what I very strongly suspect is a fact, and that's what the head of the Malaysian Air Force said. That was backed up by a senior military member, and 10 hours later, probably with guns held to their head, it was retracted when Malaysia clearly has told the players of the world, the foreign policy players, that they're going to be a player too. So that's after that, it's going to be at least days before I think you can further speculate on what's going on. Because there's one thing for certain: the facts absolutely will never be. There may be a reality set of facts, but actual facts, I am quite certain, will never come out of this one.
Let's go to Ron in Richlands, North Carolina. Hey, Ron, go ahead. You're on with James Sanders.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. What I wanted to know was, any other instances of planes disappearing in that area? And the most important question, how much fuel would allow the plane to travel once it disappeared? Like, how far could it have went once it disappeared?
Okay, two questions there. One, in terms of the fuel, if it was fully loaded, that type of plane, and I'm not sure that's the long-distance version or not, it's the 200, and I didn't look up to see its range, but those planes, I mean, these are the planes that will take you from San Francisco, for instance, to Australia, pushing 11 hours in flight. So if this is an extended version, then it's half the world. If not, minus a couple thousand miles. It'll go many, many thousands of miles. And the other was, have there been any other disappearances in that area? Yes. There was another one. I don't think there have been any where they didn't eventually find something, but I haven't really thoroughly investigated that. I did come across one that was somewhere within the last 20 years that may have not been found for a good long period of time.
Some people say, like the Bermuda Triangle off of Florida, that there could be another kind of place like that in that region as well. Have we had any disappearances of ships or anything, James, in that area?
Well, that's an area that the pirates work out of, not too far from there, and maybe even that far down. I'm not sure. But I'm really not certain. I don't know specifically of any, and if ships did disappear, with all the activity between the pirates and the military and everything else that's down there, I can't tell you. I don't know if there's a Bermuda Triangle type thing in there or not.
Let's go to Michael in Detroit, Michigan, east of the Rockies. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, George, how are you doing?
Good, Michael. Thank you.
Let me tell you something. You are brilliant. If it wasn't for your broadcasting, I wouldn't have thought of this. I know how to get to the plane.
What happened?
Your whole listening audience, call the newspapers and tell the telephone companies to reverse ping the cell phone. The cell phone will tell where the GPS is, and it'll say, here we are. And we'll at least tell you where the tower, where the transmitter is going. If it wasn't for you telling me that they could make a phone call and it didn't go through, at least you connect the phone. Now you know the GPS version. They can track it.
I love, good idea. I got to believe, James, that if that Wall Street Journal report was correct, that phones were ringing, as strange as it may seem, I would think that they have already tried to do that, don't you?
I'm sure that they're on top of that game. If they're not, then we just disband the NSA. Yeah, I'm positive that would have been done early. And if they found any info on it, you'd never know about it, of course. There'd be no reason to tell the public.
I mean, there's, knowing what I know about smartphones and cell phones, I mean, if the phone is on, it will ring and then eventually go to voicemail. But if the phone is dead, if the battery's gone, if it's not on, it'll go straight to voicemail. It won't have a ringing sound to it, which everybody seems to be reporting when they call their family or friends.
Right. And there's one other thing that popped up, because I don't have anything else to add on that because I'm not an electronic wizard. But an outfit called Digital Globe that's online, www.digitalglobe.com, they collect virtually all available satellite imagery, that's not coded from around the world. And you can get at it anytime you want, going over to their site, and they put out I guess you'd call it a plea to the public to come and start grabbing off. I guess the ocean in that area is divided up into, you get your little square, and you can magnify it and search in detail, apparently right down to the wave level. And they were asking for the public to come in and grab their little square and see if they could find anything that looked like debris to give back to them so they could, professionals would then look at it. But then so many people tried to do it that the site crashed. But if they can do it, then obviously the governments are doing that as well.
Now, this was in the wee hours, so it was dark. But I'm wondering if they would have had satellite photography of that region kind of looking down on the plane, and they might be able to spot where it went that way. Is that possible, or was it just too dark?
I don't know. I did see a report where China moved 10 of of its satellites into that area to start searching. But what they can see at night, I don't know. I really don't. But now, one thing I do know is that if the plane had exploded, they've already checked that, because there is satellite imagery where if there was any kind of an explosion or presumably a missile, exploding and hitting the plane, or the plane burning, or anything that created heat, they could pick that up, and they haven't been able to find anything there.
Was there any significance, James, to the two phony passport folks who got on?
Boy, I don't know. The younger one, they have the mother, and who knows, what mother knows what their 19-year-old kid really is doing.
Yeah.
Interpol coming out and say, well, we've looked at our records and we think the probability of a terrorist attack is quite remote now that we've been able to eliminate him. Well, you can't eliminate him. He may have just not shown up in your files. I thought that was a pretty stupid and telling thing. It's in the, okay, this is probably the way we're going to go, so, we'll get on board with the world here and we'll put out these soothing pieces of nonsense. It's just not something that Interpol had any business saying. That's all I know about that.
Let's go west. Joy is in Costa Mesa, California. Joy, thanks for calling. You are on the air with us. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure
I'd
thing.
like to ask all of the people who know how to do remote viewing and all psychics to do their best to try to find the plane and the people as a public service.
Well, you know what? That's something we should ask Ed Dames and group to do, is just a project. Hey, anything will help. Remote viewers, part of a past government program, James. So these guys know what they're doing. I guess that won't hurt. That won't hurt at all. What about the possibilities? If this plane was hijacked but taken, where could they have landed a Boeing 777, a plane that big? Can't be on a small little dirt airfield. It's got to be in some airport somewhere, right?
Yeah, you would think so. I guess there are parts of the desert out there that if they knew in advance that they were going to be landing a heavy plane, they'd know, they'd have to be smart enough to get somebody to do some calculations. But in all probability, a plane like that, if they ever wanted to use it again, it'd have to come into an airport. And you do have to look and say, not too far up the road to Iran. But, that's, I have no clue on that one. But that would be really a speculative guess. But it is just up the road from where that plane seemed to be heading at a very low altitude.
Here's the other strange part. Terrorists want publicity.
Right.
Whether they are tweeting it now or putting it, all over the place, they want the world to know that they did this. They've been very silent in this situation. Nobody's come forward yet. They haven't said what they did. They haven't said they blew up a plane. I find that unusual, don't you?
In terms of if it was just going to be the taking of the plane, yeah. There's two probabilities that kind of speak to that, and one is if it was going to be used as a kind of a 9/11 thing. Somewhere within flight distance of that plane, they intended to crash it into something, which would, of course, give our team, if they were good analysts and good spies, and had some hint it was going down, they would just take the thing out so we didn't have another 9/11. Or, quite obviously, if it was a terrorist thing, there was another mission involved. It could have been taking out somebody on the plane. If it wasn't a 9/11 or taking somebody out of the plane off, just taking them out,
right,
killing them, then there is no reasonable, rational explanation for this having anything to do with terrorism.
No, there really isn't. And to date, nobody has said anything about anybody specifically prominent on this plane, have they?
No, not prominent, but they don't have to be prominent. They just have to be something that somebody with the ability to do the dirty deed needed to take them out. I mean, it could be somebody with knowledge.
Could be a businessman that they wanted a hit on or something, right?
Yeah, there's a vast. You can speculate on that for days. Actually, in the type of person that could have been on that plane that isn't known Intelligence would eventually figure that one out if they haven't already.
We're going to come back with you, James. We're going to take some final calls, and of course, we have to also think about the possibility that it was in the luggage, and there was no suicide bomber. That maybe it was set up in the luggage. We'll be back in a moment. Hey, thank you to those of you who have been watching our television program Beyond Belief. Last week was a record week. I really appreciate that. If you'd like to look at it for free for 10 days, simply go to beyondbelief.com and sign up for that. And you can also look at all the other available videos that are there during that 10-day period. beyondbelief.com. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. James Sanders with us. James, back in 1964, there was a movie called Fate is the Hunter, and it starred Glenn Ford, and it had to do with, of course, the possibility that a plane that went down was done by pilot error, and Glenn Ford, of course, the investigator, did not believe it, and he ended up investigating it and found out a spilled coffee cup that went into the equipment is what caused that plane to go down. What has happened to the beacons? I mean, it seems like everything is going wrong on this plane and this investigation. What about the beacons that are supposed to be so fail-safe? They're not emitting the sounds that they should be.
Well, we don't know that. Ships have to drag their sonar equipment. To the best of my knowledge, you can't hear them from the air, but I may be wrong on that. There may be technology that wasn't around in 1996 that they can use aircraft to do it. But from my knowledge, ships have to drag their little sonar gizmos to search for it. But those things will go for a pretty long period of time.
30 days, they say.
Yeah.
To me, that would be critical. If they can find that, that's probably where the plane is.
Yeah, you would think so. I will say this: of all the aircraft accidents I've looked into, and of course TWA 800, it is the government with ease gets its own way in these investigations. The dominant media will not go, wait a minute, that's just not getting the job done. I mean, you can look at Egyptian Air, Swiss Air, American 587 is the most compelling case.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know below what you guys think about the news feed that's being provided while we, provide Terraria items. This is something that you like, or if you can recommend something for us to listen to that you guys would find interesting. Post below. Make certain that you like and subscribe. If you too would like to receive Terraria items, you know what to do. Leave us your gamer tag, like the video, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. Also, make certain that you utilize our BBM pin so that you can send us messages via your Android device or iPhone, iPad, maybe even Android tablets. Anyways, it's pretty awesome. We can message one another on the fly. Anyways, guys, have a wonderful night. We'll talk to you soon. Hoorah!
Rock like this, rock like that. Go ahead and get your grown man on. Drop it like this, drop it like that. Go ahead and get your grown woman on. Give me a bag of good and a bunch of tricks, cause everyone too tough to be rocking like this. So come on, shake the load up, come on, shake loose your stress. I got a fifth yet and I can't miss my chance, cause shorty looking too good with the way she dance. So come on, shake the load up, come on, shake loose your stress.